You are listening to the B2B Marketing Mindset with Pete Monfre and Bill Lowell. We want to help demystify marketing to reduce risk, drive more and better opportunities, and grow your business. Are you ready to master marketing?
Are you ready to master marketing? Listen, I'm Pete Monfre. Let's get into the B2B Marketing Mindset, shall we? So today we're talking about some really common problems that service businesses face when it comes to growing and growth. And I've spent my entire adult life running a marketing agency selling services. And I've worked with a lot of other agencies to help solve these problems. And I'm talking design firms, consulting firms, basically businesses that sell services. And there's this pattern that we see over and over again where the companies have the same problems kind of in the early years of growing the business. And these problems often kill good companies with very smart people. And I've seen this play out over and over again. And it is an expensive set of lessons. So let's, oh my goodness. Let's see if we can get our titles straightened out here. There we go. Oh, it just starts over again. I'm just punching buttons madly here, so excuse me for a minute.
See, that's what happens. You get all this new technology and then,
We do have all this new technology. So, but anyway, let us welcome the disembodied voice of Bill Lowell, our co-host. And this problem, I'm curious as to what you think about this and if you've seen this sort of thing. Not only in your business, but with other clients. And we'll get into, there's 5 things that we see that are really common, but I was wondering about that. Because we haven't really talked about this very much.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I've definitely seen it, and I think a lot of the organizations that we've worked with, have seen it as well. And I think a couple of things, and then we can get into details if you'd like, but in my opinion, I think it's a strategy issue, isn't it? It's like, what business are you in, and have you done, your due diligence in order to know where you place yourself in the market, and if it's the price pressure kind of thing, you have a decision to make, right? With the strategy, are you going to fall for it and succumb to it, or are you going to kind of stay solid? But hopefully, you have a lot of good information before that to make that decision. And then the second thing, you and I have talked about this a million times, Pete, and I really think we need a podcast on this, is the life cycle of products and services and organizations. I mean, and I think that really plays here too. So like if you're getting to the end of that maturity life cycle, or you're really coming down, then maybe the price pressure increases just because you're becoming a commodity business. And a lot of competitors are there. But if you're in your prime and you're doing good things and you're doing innovation, there should be no reason in the world why you have to succumm to that peer pressure and price pressure.
I think it is very related to the life cycle of companies. And what I'm thinking of is, and this was my experience. So this is what I know the best is my own experience. We started a company because we thought we could do it better than our employers, and really didn't understand the skills that were needed to run a company. We knew the work really well, and so that's super common too. It's the technician who starts a business and finds out those are 2 really different skill sets, knowing your expertise, but then knowing how to run a business. So that's part of it, and it happens, it either happens right away, or it happens, let's say, a year in or 2 years in, where you hit a wall, okay, and now you're getting this one of these 5 things. We'll talk about it. Price pressure is the one we're talking about right now. It's our first bullet. But it's just so, I just thought it was an interesting topic because it is so very common, and it seems to be the same through these types of businesses. And so what is behind this? Now, we've done research on it. I've also sat in, talked to a lot of different agency owners, worked with marketing agency owners, basically sharing my experiences, my expertise, how I've solved these problems with them. But back in the early days, I mean, you were kind of a coach advisor for us in the early days, and we were going through these problems. And so we didn't solve these problems on our own. It took a lot of input from people that had already walked in the shoes. And so they're vexing problems. I think we'll probably end up oversimplifying a bit because of time constraints, but relentless price pressure is the first one I thought of that I see all of the time, and it's where you're feeling like either we can't raise our prices or, God, we need to lower our prices.
Or we need to lower it to get this business that's coming in. And sometimes it's, oh, we got to do that because this one really looks like, this is the customer, or this one is the client that we've really wanted. And then you do all kinds of things which are silly, that you kind of almost take your integrity away by doing some of these things. So it's kind of sad.
Well, and I think that's really true. And you do it over and over again, and pretty soon it becomes a pattern. And without really doing research, doing market research, it's going to be really hard to know where to price yourself. And also, keep in mind, there's strategies like the premium pricing model that really has nothing to do with other people charge. It has to do with
Right.
how you sell your value and how you demonstrate that value, and whether you can sell or not. That's another thing.
Right.
And we'll get to that here in a minute, but where it's a lot easier to sell something at a low price. And so I do meet agencies all the time that are just almost obsessed with getting the prices low, low, low as possible. But what goes out the window is quality,
Right.
service levels, and attention, right?
Yeah.
It becomes about cutting corners, and they think they're going to make it up on volume. Maybe I'm not sure, but I'm not sure what they're thinking, honestly. Now, I'm not saying that you're immune from market pressures. Like
Right.
you can't. There is a
Yeah.
range that where you're going to be. You'll find out if your price is too high pretty quick, but you have to look at other factors. It may not be the price, but the price pressure also, I think, comes from where people, when they start a business, they underestimate their value.
Mhm.
They don't feel like they're worth it. I just talked to
Well,
somebody who's got a phenomenal background. He's new to being a marketing consultant, and he's charging $50 an hour.
oh, wow.
And
Wow.
he's got background with Fortune 100.
He obviously didn't do his research, or he did a strategy that may not be serving him that well because maybe he's going to get a bunch of. See, that's another strategy that I think is a fallacy because you're going to get companies that do this all the time, and I see cellular companies doing this too, where all of a sudden we go low for the first year. Insurance companies were notorious for this. We'll go low to get the business, and then our goal is let's creep it up and get it back to where it belongs, or we'll start. And people will fight you against that as well. So I also think it's like somebody who is going out into the marketplace and finding their job, their first job or their second job. It's the same thing, and then they take a job at a very low salary, thinking that, oh, once I get to this experience, then I'm going to be able to jump. Well, the only way you're going to jump is to go to another company because the company that you're at most likely is not going to perceive your value and raise you to the point where you are. And I think it's the same thing with what we're talking about right here.
Well, and it's imposter syndrome sometimes as
Yeah.
well, where we
Yes.
think that, well, gosh, I'm new to this, and I'm just they just don't think they're worth it, right? I think it's pretty normal to underestimate your value, right?
Yeah.
And especially, even like, I've been doing this for 3 decades. I sometimes underestimate my value as well. I mean, so we're not immune to it. But I remember the agency went through this problem where we were just, and actually the way it affected us, we found out, is that the companies we were talking to didn't take us seriously because we were so much less expensive than what they were accustomed to. And as we started to get more sophisticated in the way that we sold, and we started to understand what other agencies were charging and what clients' expectations were, and knowing our own costs too, like really understanding our costs. It's another thing that at
Right.
first I don't know if we really understood what our costs were. And so we were basically billing less than what it cost us to deliver the work, and we had to change. But it took maybe
Yeah.
a year to get to figure it out, right?
And some people never do, or
Right.
they don't know how much money they've left on the table. So I think you're absolutely. If you guys were able to figure it out in a year, you guys did a great job with that.
Well, I don't know if we fixed it in a year, but we figured out it was a problem. And we
Yeah.
had to change our whole value proposition and really what our core capabilities were. We had to really change almost everything.
Yeah.
And it was really tough. But again, I had some great, I don't remember back in the day, there was a thing called, it was Anthony Mikes and Second
Mm.
Wind Network, and they had an
Oh yeah.
agency
Yeah. Yeah.
roundtables, and Dave somebody, agency roundtable management, where we got to sit down with other agencies in non-competing markets, and we shared financials, we shared everything, and it
Yeah.
was amazing and very eye-opening. So but if you're seeing a lot of price pressure, it's really a symptom of something else. Now, I'm not saying that everything is about getting as much money out of the client as you can, right? It's more about, are you somewhere in the value, are you priced where, according to the value that you're bringing? Are you priced where you can stay in business and make a profit? Are you able to have some kind of life? Can you pay a team? I mean, there's all kinds of considerations,
Right.
but if you're seeing this relentless price pressure, you're not alone. This happens in the
Can,
early days, and you got to get a handle on it.
can I make it happens in the early days, but it also happens during like recession and tough times. So I think, you could be seeing that now a little bit. But the other thing that we've talked about, did you have, I don't want to go ahead if you had a thought, grab it.
No, go ahead.
Uh, we've talked about this, and I would encourage our listeners to go back and look at one of the other podcasts regarding the RFP process. But I think this is kind of along those same lines. Like you're going to place yourself at a competitive disadvantage because you've just chosen from a strategy standpoint, if you succumb to this pressure, to let's see what we can do to how fast we can go to the bottom of the barrel here. And that's just terrible.
Yeah, and that well has no bottom.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, it's
Exactly.
really
Yeah.
like you just, this is a tough one, but I
Yeah.
think this is where advisors and mentors really helped me. And but I do think, and to your point earlier, there is a time sometimes to adjust your pricing downward when things, if the economy is really tight. It's not a mistake, but you have to have a plan. And one thing clients in our business hate is change orders. So there is this way of doing business where you lowball it at the beginning, and then you
Right.
just hit them with change order after change order after change order. That's not a good strategy either. And so um, this low price obsession leads to the next thing, which is clients from hell. Uh, and so it attracts the wrong kind of clients. And it's not just that, but it's also like, I'm trying to remember back, it was like, this is not what we thought the business was going to be like. This is not what we thought the clients were going to be like this. And it
Yeah.
wasn't the client's fault either. It was our fault. Um, we were
Yeah.
attracting the wrong kinds of clients.
Maybe it was your fault. I would give a little bit maybe to some of the clients too, because some clients can be unruly. So, or they bring out the best in us, as I would say, right?
Well, and I've gotten older. My tolerance level has lowered
Oh,
quite a bit.
exactly.
But we were young and eager, and sometimes you're thinking in terms of, we need the money. Well,
Right.
why is money so short? Are we not charging enough? I mean, it's all related together.
Yeah.
And if you're heavily discounting, or you're just, maybe you don't really have an ideal client profile that
Yeah.
you've thought through, and you're saying, look, and they're going to have the discipline to say, we're going to stick with this. Like, if the client doesn't fit this criteria, you're going to say no,
Yeah.
regardless of the bank account. Now, if you're out there listening, push back if you think we're wrong about this. But I
Yeah,
think
we'd love to
that,
hear that.
you know, and all clients are difficult, because this is a difficult business that we're in. So we're not talking about everything's always peachy and rosy, but we're talking about, it's like Valpak. Does anybody remember Valpak? These coupons that go out in the mail?
They're still out
They're
there
still there.
today. I still see them every once in a while.
It's like, it's the people that come in for the $2 buffet,
Yeah.
and then you can't please them, right?
Right.
The problem's not them. You got to raise the price. My music shows here in Austin, we price them according to the type of people that we wanted to come out, and that worked. Now, I got accused of being elitist because of my price point, and I said, well, yeah, if you don't have $60, maybe you shouldn't come to my show. I don't know. Yeah, I guess I am sort of elitist there,
And
but
that's reasonable.
it's knowing who my target audience is, and it's also
Yes.
delivering that value. And post COVID, we've kind of stopped doing this, but pre COVID, the market was a bit different. And so you'd think, the general consensus was it's going to be a ghost town at your shows, man. Everybody else is charging like 10, 15 bucks. We sold out 36 consecutive months. Okay. So it's about knowing your audience, knowing your value, and then having the discipline, I think, to control those fear impulses, right? I've got to take this client because whatever. Got to lower the price because whatever, right? And maybe it stems from not having a strategy at all.
Yeah. I actually think that that's a good point. I was going to share a story about my company, which I probably shared with you, but at one time we had about 15 employees and all doing research and, doing things. And I remember it's exactly like you were saying, this is in our early days. And all I kept on thinking about is how much business I had to keep bringing in just to feed everybody and how much of a disappointment it would be if I didn't still, and how many lives I would be impacting, I mean, the whole thing. And you just, it consumes you. But then you remember this, we cut back to 5 full-time employees and we stayed there for a long, long time. And then we hand selected and worked a lot with more discerning clients. We made them, I don't want to say unfortunate, but we made a lot more money doing that. And it didn't drive me as crazy. It's like, so I think to your point about strategy, you need to sit back and make a decision or try to figure it out with a peer group or somebody else like a coach or an advisor and try to figure out what is your best strategy, because I think that is just so important for everybody, no matter what B2B business you're in, for them to do that.
Yeah. And if, coach is such a bad word, people think, coach, life coach, crystals, supplements, unemployed guy in between jobs, but we're talking about real ones. Like there are really some great coaches, advisors, mentors, whatever you want to call them, that I think the important thing is, have they lived through what you're going through? Have they lived it, or did they buy a book, or did they take some courses? Let's say you're an executive in a company, you're trying to move up the ladder. You might not want a type of coach that has maybe been self-employed their whole life. You want somebody who's navigated that circumstance. If you're running your own company, you want somebody that's run a company that has been in your shoes. But I think there's huge value in that. And I do that. I love working with other agencies and sharing my experience with them, because we faced down these problems and we solved them, right? And finally, after several years of struggling, we did start growing. But I don't know if you remember, we had a guy that, when we were first learning about business development people, we had a guy that was really good at meetings and lunches, but not so good at closing. And
I remember him very well.
And we kept him on for too long, and because of that pressure, this wanting to do the right thing and take care of people. And I still am that way, but it was a really hard lesson. It was a 6-figure lesson. And so, again, this stuff's hard. We don't want to trivialize it.
But you mentioned something I think that's really important, and I'm just going to put a name to it, okay? We call it benchmarking in our industry. Let's go out and find somebody who's really good at what you need to learn about, or let's find out exactly like you said, Pete, somebody that has been through this before that kind of can guide us. And whether we do exactly as they did, we probably won't, but we can at least learn from them and then create our own path. It just makes us so much smarter, and it saves you so much time and energy and frustration.
That's it. It saves you time, because you can try to solve this through trial and error, right? And hopefully your company will survive it, and you'll find the answers soon, enough before it's too late. But it didn't work that way for me. I mean, Jim Locatelli, if you're out there,
I remember him.
We had some great advisors that really helped us a lot, and they shared what they've been through, and it allowed us to sort of leapfrog over the problems. And because we'd already tried trial and error, and it was mostly error, honestly. It was nuts.
Well, if you're an entrepreneur, everybody does that. So don't, you can't feel bad. And for the listeners out there, do not be hard on yourself, because every entrepreneur goes through this. We call it growing pains. It's like.
Well, and that's why I wanted to do this, is because these things are almost universal to growing companies. Now, I focus on marketing agencies, marketing services companies, web developers, and digital agencies, these kinds of things, consultants. But I really think almost every category of company sees these things during their initial growth phases. And so that's
Yeah.
why I thought it was so important to talk about. But let me just take a minute here. And if you're out there listening on Spotify, let's say, or more popular, the Apple podcast, Apple Podcast, I was going to call it the podcast store, whatever it is, you're not getting the whole story. This is a video podcast, and you can go to b2bmarketingmindset.com and see the rest of the story. We've got a lot more resources there. We expand on these topics. You can sign up and subscribe. Lots of stuff going on at b2bmarketingmindset.com. We encourage you to do that so you get the entire picture. And so I just want to throw that out there. And also, we're really attractive people. You might want to see that. I don't know. They look good. All right. It's pleasant. All right.
Especially the people that have cataracts.
That's right. They've got the real thick glasses. We look amazing. The beer goggles.
You're gonna love it.
Love it. Should be a requirement for the program to have a few beers before it. If the show gets better, the more you drink.
I'm telling you.
So these things, I put them in an order because they all kind of stack on top of each other. So why accept clients from hell? Why give in to price pressure? Maybe you don't know how to sell, right? I mean, everybody thinks they know how to sell, right? They've read books and there's all kinds of different methods and methodologies. But I think a lot of times what happens is it's a lot harder to sell something close to what its value is. It's a lot easier to discount it. Right.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to win the less desirable, the tiny clients, the demanding clients, the unreasonable clients, than it is to maybe go through the gauntlet with, Harley Davidson was one of our clients. They had a line of agencies running out the door. They were quick to tell you so. And it took a long time and a lot of effort to win them over. Now, it was worth it, right? But I kind of realized this late in my career when I discovered Sandler Sales. And it gave me the tools and a methodology to where I could better communicate value and also understand and learn what their budget is and how they make decisions and how committed they are and all kinds of things that I do you think that's a factor where it's a lot easier to lower the price than it is to learn how to sell?
Oh, I mean, without a doubt, Now, I'm not saying that you offer some promotion or you do some marketing talented skill things. I mean, so that's just good business. So I think that's okay. But yeah, it's like if you start lowering that price just to lower it, or just like you said, just to grab somebody, I still go back to, I think you're going to see, I love that comment you made. You're going to that endless well. So let's go see how far we can get into that hole,
Pretty soon you have nitrogen poisoning.
Yeah.
And but I think that marketers in general and people who run marketing services firms, they're usually not very good at selling, and they actually look at selling with some level of disdain.
By the way, nobody in professional services are that way either. In fact, I don't know if I ever told you, like when we first started off, our whole business was centered around the healthcare field, and we worked a lot with doctors and all kinds of different type of specialties. None of them knew. And then we moved into the lawyers, you know what I mean? And none of them knew how to sell. So I don't know that any professional service really has. I mean, I think they're getting so much better now, but I think if you go back to when we were doing this at the beginning, it was just a different world.
I remember being terribly embarrassed making sales calls and just being a doofus. And somehow we still managed to make it work. And we'll have some episodes coming up where we'll talk about this a little bit, but I just think it's a big issue, and I just want to share with people, if you feel like your sales skills aren't up to snuff, there's lots of ways to improve and I'm a big proponent of Sandler. I teach my clients how to sell. And when I'm talking about selling, I'm not talking about what probably people think is selling. What I like to teach people is how to let their clients buy. So
Right.
not being pushy, not trying to play tricks on people, none of that stuff, but being very authentic and really sincerely trying to help them solve their problems. And you'll find that this stuff gets a lot easier. But if you're making decisions because it's just easier to close a deal for $2,000 than it is for $20,000, what you're going to find out is you're going to put the same amount of effort in to win that
Oh yeah.
$2,000 sale as you are the $20,000 sale. And
No, no.
one of the things that we ran into at the agency was, as we kept succumbing to price pressure, we got to the point where we didn't even have the time to even do the job physically.
See, that's just it, right?
And so what do? I mean, you don't, most companies, this is where you get outsource it to Bangladesh. You get
Yeah.
templated things. You get web development companies who basically have the same website that they sell to the companies over and over and over and over and over and over again. Well, because it's cheap, right? I see this in the trades a lot, where roofing companies and this kind of thing, they'll come to me and be like, oh, well, we pay this company $500 a month. They do all of our marketing. Okay. Wow. You know, I don't get how that works. Now, all of them are universally unhappy. So maybe there's a connection there. I'm not sure. But it's like not
But
realistic.
can I mention something though that I think is really important with regard to the sales? So obviously there are ways you can learn how to sell, and I think like you talked about, you can hire a coach like yourself to teach people, and I think that that's great. But I think another thing that's really important, and you and I, we've talked about this so much, Pete. I think people need to put together a profile. Like, who is that ideal customer or client, or who are we going to go after? And then really refine that, because I think once you know that, it's almost like having your vision and mission statement. All of a sudden, other opportunities come in and you've got your vision and mission statement. You can say, does this new thing fit our vision for where we want to take this company? If the answer is no, well, okay, it just makes life so much easier. So I think the same thing is true with the sales prospecting. You need to figure out who is the right target that we want to go after. Otherwise, like you said, you're going to waste so much time and energy and resources going after stuff that probably is not good for you.
And maybe you're going to spend a lot of time chasing things that you're never going to win.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so lots going on there. But I think your sales ability and having a good methodology will save you from the first two things, the price pressure and the clients from hell.
Yeah.
Now there's this other thing that I think entrepreneurs, and I know I'm really guilty of this too, that it's what I call the boom and bust cycle. So you work like crazy to get the work.
Yeah.
And then you work like crazy to do the work, and then your sales pipeline dries up. So you work like crazy to get the work, and it's like this sine wave, and you can go pretty far doing this, but you are going to burn yourself out in a bad way. And so the boom and bust cycle. Have you experienced that?
Not only have I experienced it, I've experienced it thousands of times, and I've also seen it with a lot of my clients. And I think it's just like you said, it's like you're going out there, you're trying to get the business, then the business comes in and you got to do the business or provide or supply. And so you're focused on that. And then all of a sudden you kind of come up for air one day, you go, oh my gosh, we don't have anything in the pipeline, or we really need, then you really, from a psychological standpoint, you look desperate, because now you're going out there going, you don't need any marketing research today, do you? I mean, it's like, that's the worst time to sell. You should be selling when you're so full and you've got all this business, because that's when you're
Right.
Psychologically, you're on top of the world, and people can feel that, they can see that, and they see that energy and they go, I want a piece of that. But when you're down in the dumps and you're trying to, that's like the most difficult time to do that. So I have a scenario that I used to tell people about, and it's an investment strategy, and it's called dollar cost averaging. So for those of you investors out there, what it means is I take a certain amount of money every single month and I put it into the market. And sometimes when the market is down, I get to buy more. Sometimes when the market's up, I buy less. But the bottom line is, after the year, I've really pretty much outweighed all of those ups and downs. I think the same strategy holds true for marketing, advertising, other small businesses that are the B2B. It's like invest a certain amount every single month and just do it. You know what I mean? Don't pull back if things get tough. I mean, just stick with it and you're going to come out much further ahead. And it helps you when you are those in those busy times.
You know, I'm going to make a confession here. I still get locked in the boom and bust cycle. You know, we're a
Really?
very small company,
Yeah.
and this is one reason that, so this is like true confessions episode.
Uh-oh.
It's so easy to talk about this stuff, right? And act like, oh, we've got all of it together, man. No, we're in the same boat as you a lot of times, and we fall off the wagon, right? And we make the same mistakes again and again, and we remember. At least we have the benefit of saying, hey, I remember we solved this once. We already know the answer. We just have to be disciplined and do it. But it's you end up just working so much that it leads to kind of the next thing, which is you just don't have any life. And
Right.
we've been in kind of post COVID, we've been kind of in the throes of that, right? And so
Yeah.
I've actually shifted what I do to I'm looking at the things that I do, because my main thing is doing marketing plans, doing marketing research. You're my research guy. We do marketing audits, and I looked at the things that we do, and my wife, of course, has a design and media production company, and we looked at that and we said, what are the things that energize us, and what are the things that drain us, right?
There you
And
go.
so,
There
and
you
maybe
go.
that's part of getting older, but I realized a couple things. I love being a mentor and coaching and mentoring other businesses in the marketing services space. Love it. It fires me up. I've got a great client right now, opening 3 locations, 3 different cities, and we're just killing it. It's a
And
blast working with them.
and you're great at doing it. So why
I
not
love
share
doing it.
that? Yeah.
Well, you know what was hanging me up is it's not as
Hmm.
profitable. I
Oh,
don't make as much money. Well,
okay.
my attitude about that's changed. It's not. I'm not doing this for money anymore.
Yeah.
And I had to remind myself of that. It's what energizes me and what doesn't. I think everything will follow. The other thing is we've gotten back into doing more creative work through Heidi Designs, our other company. We love doing that too. And again, the price point is different. It's I don't know. I don't know if I'm just kind of rambling a little bit, but it's think about what energizes you, what doesn't, and a lot of these problems will start to solve themselves. But I think I've always been sort of focused on money as the measure of success.
I think when you run a business, I mean, it doesn't matter. Isn't that one of them? I mean, growth and revenue is usually, satisfied clients. I mean, those are
Yeah,
usually the top three things. So
I've really learned that it's more important to have a really happy, thrilled client than to try to
yeah,
extract every nickel out of them. Who
I would agree
cares,
with that.
right?
Yeah. Well,
But
they'll tell more people than if you do that right too.
yeah, I think so. I mean, it's like it's maybe as you get more mature in your business that you start to prioritize different things. But the big
Yeah.
thing for me is work-life balance. So
Mm.
a lot of these things lead to a real lack of work-life balance where really all you're doing is working and working and working and working. You're
Yeah.
working when you don't have work to bring in work. You're working to get more work when you or to do the work when you have the work. You're working to get even more work because you're hiring people, and you're working to hire people, and you're work. I am super guilty of this. I tell people I've got a real workahol problem. I'm a workaholic,
Yeah.
and that workahol is just got to get it. And I think it's a worthy goal to have some kind of balance. I still, I actually moved away from playing larger music shows, and I'm looking forward to playing some small shows in little clubs for fun. That's part of my work-life balance. And I think I have to force myself on this.
I think that I could be very wrong, but having worked with students for over 30 years, one of the things that I've seen, I think these last couple of generations and the one that's there now, I really think they get the work-life balance. So, in fact, they get it so much better than we do, I think, Pete. I think that they really understand, yeah, they want to work, but they want to enjoy their lives and stuff like that too. And I remember, this is really sad, but you talk about confession time. I remember when I first was experiencing it, I was thinking, what a bunch of lazy, I was really kind of upset about it. But you know what? The older I get too, the more I see it. They probably got it more together than we did because they probably saw their family members doing exactly what you were doing, what I was doing, working ourselves to death. And then when you
Right.
come up for air, it's like you couldn't even relax. I used to always tell people, if you go on vacation, the week before you go is absolutely insane, and the week you go, when you get back, it's absolutely crazy. So you better make sure you have a good vacation because on both ends of it, it's going to be bad, and that's kind of a weird sickness if you think about that. I think the work
Yeah.
balance is really important.
Well, and I'm just stressed out through the whole vacation worrying about work. But
Exactly.
my dad did this. I mean, that's what I grew up to, is not seeing
Yeah.
my dad much. He was always reaching for the brass ring, but he never got
Yeah.
the brass ring. It's not that he didn't put in the work, right? My grandfather worked at Falk Corporation, which is a
Oh, wow.
foundry, for his
Yeah.
whole life. Died
Yeah.
of emphysema from working in this foundry,
Oh,
right?
geez.
Came over from Sicily on the boat, that whole thing, and had this work ethic, and what they used to, I think 10 years ago was a grind. You got to grind, It's like, well, sometimes you do, but all five of these problems, I think if you have, well, I'll save this for the final thoughts. Let's do that. We'll go to final thoughts, and we'll wrap this up and hopefully give some good advice.
Final thoughts.
So here's what I'm thinking about this, and see what Bill thinks about it too. I think a lot of this comes down to, well, first of all, I encourage you, if you're feeling this stuff, uh, look for a book called The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. Okay,
I remember
it
that.
talks about systems and processes, and how to delegate. And I'm still not as good at it as I'd like to be, but that was a life changer for me. But maybe think about finding a good mentor, finding a good coach, somebody that's walked in your shoes, have solved these problems before, because they're just going to save you a lot of time and money and aggravation. Now, it's kind of hard to find the right coach. I think these days there's a lot of people that really shouldn't be coaches, and if they're promising you they're going to change your whole life, and they got all these courses and they're doing this and that. I think of Tony Robbins. I don't know, what do you think about Tony Robbins? But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who, they're not in it for the money. They do it because maybe they're crazy, maybe they just love helping people. In my case, I realized that it's the thing that I know the most about, is working with companies that sell services, particularly marketing services, going from 0 to 60, pivoting constantly, and really solving these kinds of problems. And even when I don't get there, at least I know what to do. But I think it has to do with having a plan and sticking to that plan.
Yeah, I think so. Or like you were saying earlier, work with somebody like yourself or a peer group or others that can help you put together a plan that's gonna, that you're gonna help guide yourself with. I think that that's gonna be key too. So
Well, and
I can give
most,
you,
go ahead.
no,
I was going to say, most good coaches, mentors, advisors, they're going to have some kind of planning framework. They're not going to be seat of the pants kind of thing. I'm thinking about
right,
Rafe Beeson, if you're out there, one of my fantastic coaches I've had, Stan Tyler, just so many people around me that have advised me, yourself, Jim Locatelli. I'm sure I'm forgetting some from back in the day. I don't remember everybody at this point, but all those agency owners that we sat around the round table with down in Florida at this resort 4 times a year. I wish I could remember their names, because I'd thank them profusely at this point. And I'm not trying to build a big company either. I think that's a little bit different. So when you're in the throes of trying to build a company,
right,
boy, these problems become really acute. And so you just can't wing it through these, I don't think.
right, right. My final thoughts are a couple things. One, I've said this several times already, and I'll say it again. Make sure that you understand and know who you are and what you are. I mean, so like, what kind of customer do you want, and really, and what makes you special? Because if you don't know that, then you're going to constantly be changing gears and going after things you shouldn't be doing. But I think that strategy helps to drive you. The second thing is, like we talked about, making sure that you understand the life cycle of your products, services, companies, your clients, because everyone goes through that. So depending on what stage they're at, you may need to diversify. You may need to do something else. And so I think recognizing that is really important. And then the last thing that I can say is just kind of an hilarious comment, but I once had an employee, her name was Michelle Ehlers, and so if she's listening, shout out to her. But one day, I kept on saying, "Can you do this?" "Oh yeah, I can do this." "Oh, can you do this?" "I can do this." And every time I would delegate to her, she would say she could do it. And then one day, she came into me and said, "These are 20 things you told me that to do, and I accepted them, but I need you to put them in a priority for me." And I was like, that was a wake-up call for you. Talked about work-life balance, where I went, holy macro, maybe we need to kind of start thinking about some of the stuff we're delegating and that we're giving out. So those are my final thoughts.
Well, I'm glad we talked about this, and if you want to talk about it more, we're really easy to find. You can follow us on LinkedIn. You can find us pretty much everywhere with this program, and don't be shy. It's just, I think this is such commonality, and I could even admit more crazy mistakes. Maybe we should do a whole program on insane expensive mistakes we've made in business.
Well, yeah, or things we've learned, and maybe what we could do is even just get a guest or two, and that would be kind of fun too.
Well, we do have guests coming up, and we're trying to almost have a guest for every program. And we had our guest couldn't make it today, but and next week I want to mention we're off. We're not going to be doing a program next Thursday, but we'll be back the following Thursday. And I didn't look up the guest yet, but it's funny because they can say the next episode XYZ, but these things are not in any sort of order out in the world, right? So go to B2B Marketing Mindset. You'll see all the episodes there. We're up to 100.
I was just going to say, we've had some really good podcasts, a lot of good information, and our guests, they have been phenomenal. So if people can go back and look at some of those shows, they're going to learn a lot.
I learn a lot, and that's one reason I do this, is I learn a lot, and so it never ends. But thank you, good insight, and we'll see everybody next Thursday.
No, 2 Thursdays.
2 Thursdays. I'm going to push this button. We'll see what happens.
You've been listening to the B2B Marketing Mindset with Pete Monfre and Bill Lowell. Add to the conversation by commenting, sharing, and liking. And don't forget to subscribe and check out the links in the comments. Learn more at b2bmarketingmindset.com.